Well, hi everyone. My name is Erin Blad, and I'm a project manager here at Sparkbox. I've spent a good portion of my career working on websites as a digital marketing manager, business analyst, product owner, and project manager. And one of the tools that I've found to be the most useful in my time working on the web is a product roadmap. So I'd like to share a bit more about that with you today. So we've all been there. The leadership at your company has decided that they want to invest in a new product or they want to reinvest in a long neglected product. They've allocated a budget, assigned a team, and knighted you to head the project up. Where do you even start, and how do you know that you're building the right things? Setting the project up well at the very beginning is the key to being successful. And in order to set a project up well, the vision and direction need to be clearly and regularly communicated to the project team, leadership, and customers. If not, the results can be detrimental. In a study done by Statistic Brain and reported on entrepreneur.com, venture capitalists listed lack of focus as the number one reason for startup failure. As project managers and product owners, we rely on the tools of our trade to help communicate clearly, maintain consensus, and build trust. For large or ongoing projects, one great tool to do that is a product roadmap. There are many benefits to a product roadmap. First, they can help set expectations by aligning stakeholders and prioritizing the most important efforts. It can serve to coordinate the development and launch of different products, and it can provide reassurance to internal and external customers. In my experience, the reassurance it provides product customers is priceless. As a former product owner, I was once told that my job was to disappoint all parties equally. In essence, by making the compromises that were best for the product, no single stakeholder would be fully pleased. And in many ways, this is true. Someone's needs or wants will always lose out when making strategic decisions. A product roadmap that clearly aligns all stakeholders on the long-term goal and vision for the product make it much easier to make those difficult decisions of what to prioritize and when. It also helps communicate that features that aren't currently priority are still being planned for in the future, and many times knowing that the feature is coming is enough to satisfy a stakeholder. But what is a product roadmap? A product roadmap is a high-level strategic plan that provides a longer-term outlook for a product. It's often somewhat visual in nature and contains a variable degree of detail depending on the audience, the level of project variability, and the need. A product roadmap is often confused with the development backlog. So to put it simply, the roadmap represents the why and the what, and the development backlog is the how. It's informed by the product roadmap, but it is more detailed and tactical. There are many types of roadmaps that may suit your project. I'm going to focus on 3 primary examples to help you get started. The first is called the Now, Next, Later roadmap. It's a very simple roadmap that is extremely easy to understand. It's really helpful when working with large and diverse audiences or presenting a broad vision to a large group. You may even consider it as a first pass in creating your roadmap because of its simplicity. It also provides a maximum amount of flexibility because it doesn't commit to any release dates. However, because it doesn't have any sort of a timeline, it won't provide enough information for product teams, executive leadership, or often customers. This type of roadmap is not suitable for a majority of projects. It may work for a product that is just being created and all features are needed before the product can be launched. It would also be a great model for a project with a lot of unknowns that would hinder us from using a different type of roadmap. It could also work for a product in a mythical world where there's an existing team, no delivery deadlines, no budgets. And I know, if someone has discovered that mythical world, please share the secret with the rest of us. Most likely, you'll see this type of roadmap only to present, you'll use this type of roadmap only to present your more detailed roadmap in a simplified format to a large and less invested group of folks, something like an all-staff meeting. Up next is the goal-oriented roadmap. And the goal-oriented roadmap adds a lot more detail and structure by tying key features back to goals and providing a timeline for releasing those features. This type of roadmap starts with the product goals first and ensures that all features support those goals. However, some stakeholders may get too focused on the release dates, so keep that in mind when you use this model. This type of roadmap is excellent for executives because it ties features back to product goals and metrics very clearly. And executives love goals and metrics. It provides confidence that each feature is being considered through this lens and that the team has an eye on measuring results and recalibrating as needed. It's suitable for a broad range of projects, including highly technical and less user-focused efforts, but may be a bit of a difficult model for projects with a lot of unknowns. And last but not least, user stories can be used to create your product roadmap. This simply prioritizes the user stories that will be important to the product, then breaks them down into the level of doneness that will be allowed for each release of the product. For example, we might want to have a user story that says that the user wants the ability to log into the product in order to make their session secure. The first release might include a basic login. The second release might enhance the login functionality by allowing for social login or a single sign-on functionality, and so on. This type of roadmap works for teams that are heavily comprised of user experience and marketing folks because it really speaks their language. It works well for projects where the product needs to be quick to market and new features can be layered on over time. This model may not work as well for more technical projects, infrastructure projects, and that kind of thing that don't lend themselves to layering on of feature improvements over time. The most important thing when considering the format of your product roadmap is ensuring that the format works for your audience. Remember that all project management tools are only effective if people use them. As you know, project management is part art and part science, and there's no one single tool that will work in all occasions and for all teams. So take a framework and adapt it to meet the needs of your group or organization. Now that we know what a product roadmap can look like, how do we use one to build trust and consensus? Well, let me start by telling you a story of what not to do. At the very beginning of my career, I was given the opportunity to be the product owner for a very large website redesign. This project had a large number of stakeholders and no clear direction. The only directive we had was that we needed to redo the entire site. Who doesn't love that? So rather than walk through the steps that I'm about to give you, we jumped right ahead into breaking down the work, building a basic roadmap without the stakeholders' input. And let me just say, the stakeholders were not happy about how we planned the work or how long it would take them to see the features they desperately wanted. So I'm here to help you avoid the pain that I experienced. Here's what I should have done instead. Product roadmap is the perfect thing for your stakeholders to rally behind. So make sure you identify all the stakeholders and not just the most obvious ones, but look for the folks who will be directly impacted by the product. Those will have to support it technically, maybe those who have to support customers using the tool, etc. Once you've assembled your stakeholders, agree on one person that will take responsibility for the product roadmap. This is typically the product owner. It could be the project manager as well. We'll be responsible for regularly updating the roadmap and communicating changes to the group. Now that you have the right people identified, you need to take some time to create shared goals. These should be goals for the product that all stakeholders can agree on. These goals will become your North Star as you plan your roadmap going forward. There are several approaches you can take to identify the goals. In general, you want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to provide input into the goals and all opinions are weighed fairly. It's extremely important that everyone feels heard, or you might not reach a true consensus. For many of our efforts at Sparkbox, we prefer to do brief one-on-one stakeholder interviews. This gives everyone a chance to share their thoughts in a casual environment. We then collate all stakeholders' thoughts and present them back to the group. This is a great time for the team to realize that they have shared concerns and pain points. It creates consensus. It also sets the stage well to begin talking about the goals. I like to have one person take notes for the group in a visual space. So if you're in person, a wall with sticky notes always works. If you're remote, share a Miro board or a PowerPoint slide. Let everyone present all their ideas for the product's goals. No ideas off limits, and we won't worry if the ideas are similar to each other for the time being. Once all the ideas are on the table, then you can start doing things like combining duplicates, wordsmithing goals, throwing out anything that doesn't seem to apply. From there, the whole team has to grapple with prioritizing the goals. And it's okay to have conflict and disagreement during this process, as long as it's respectful and you focus on finding a compromise that all parties can agree on in the end. The dust will eventually settle on the conversation, and you'll realize that your team has actually identified a handful of goals for the effort. Your newly identified goals will take you to the most fun and most difficult part of the entire roadmap process, prioritization. Coming into a roadmap meeting, every stakeholder will have a list of things they want the product to do. Again, get all those ideas out on the table. Something visual works well for this also, either sticky notes on a physical board or a shared desktop. There are a lot of rubrics you can use to prioritize goals, but in my work, I've found that the simpler models for prioritization work well, especially for an initial pass. This might include things like giving every participant $100 that they can spend on features, essentially to vote on what should be prioritized. Once each stakeholder has purchased their features, those with the highest dollar amount are prioritized over those with the lower dollar amounts. A similar example could be dot voting, where each participant uses dots to vote on priority. Another simple exercise, and probably my favorite exercise, is the value effort matrix, where you have the team collaboratively plot each feature on a chart with the level of effort on one axis and alignment to product goals on the other axis. Whatever method you choose, encouraging stakeholders to communicate and work together will be key to creating consensus and a roadmap for the entire team to rally behind. Your roadmap is prioritized and you have your ideas on paper. You're almost there. And at this point, you'll be tempted to add details that are pertinent to the work, but will bog down the roadmap unnecessarily. I think this is going to look a little different for every project and team, but in general, if you can capture the information elsewhere more effectively, don't put it on your roadmap. For one project I worked on, the leadership team requested that we include things like staffing, project burn down, and other key metrics on the project roadmap itself. Information like this is complementary to the roadmap, but would make the roadmap much more difficult to maintain. Since this is a living document, you want to keep the roadmap simple and easy to edit as priorities shift over time. You also want to remember to use a medium that is easy for all team members to access and uses a common language. Remember that the audience for your roadmap will represent a variety of disciplines, so you want to avoid jargon, acronyms, and anything that might be department specific. Finally, make sure you review your roadmap regularly. I should say review and update your roadmap regularly. Review it with your stakeholders and distribute it for wide consumption. This is a public document that everyone should have access to. You may even need to consider creating an internal roadmap for corporate use and an external version of the product roadmap for public consumption. This is really where a roadmap begins to build trust and consensus. When people see that the roadmap adjusts and changes over time based on their feedback and needs, they begin to trust the long-term vision of the product and the team doing the work. For more information on product roadmaps, check out my article in the Sparkbox Foundry called Creating a Roadmap to Product Success. Thank you.